So legislative priorities for Mason County School Districts. The first one is we narrowed it down to our 4 priorities here. The first one is salary and collective bargaining. The inequities between districts have increased with regionalization and salary planning changes. And our solutions, one of the meetings that we met with Drew earlier, and it was suggested that we come up with solutions, not just complain about the issues, but we wanted to come up with some solutions that could be considered. First one, define expectations for professional positions. Again, this one would be no cost to the state, but something that would help greatly with collective bargaining. Prototypical model should be revisited to fund what districts need to do business. And the prototypical model is something where an average is created, and that's what they build our allocation off of. The issue is sometimes that works for middle and larger districts. It's hard to get down to 0.03 of a nurse and other pieces like that, so it just doesn't work for all districts. Reinstate the salary allocation model and the staff experience factor. Right now, we're operating off of an average, and of course, again, that's issues if you have a more senior staff. It kind of penalizes districts that might have a more senior staff. It also can greatly influence them if you feel comfortable hiring. Implement an equitable regionalization model that includes factors, needs reflective of rural districts. Again, and I can just use Southside as an example. Southside has a 1.0 amount that we get. Compared to other districts that might have a 1.18, a 1.24, which means they get 18%, 24% more funding just on the allocation. So, local levies. Levy limits greatly impact districts who depend upon local support for many items not covered in apportionment or the prototypical model. And suggestions we would have is to keep it local by reinstating our voter-approved levies and allow us to spend these resources as we need. That would be no additional cost to the state. Raise state LEA contribution to lift districts below $150,000 per thousand to $2,500 per student. And I know that's one of the things we discussed earlier is that kind of impact. And I think that a lot of the legislators really were hoping to backfill, or that there wasn't going to be as much of a negative impact. And again, this varies so greatly with the different districts. There are districts that were slightly affected, and then other districts that are greatly affected. Employee benefits said, this new requirement will have negative impacts on the districts in Mason County and in our ESD who provide support to all of our districts. And I bring up the ESD because, again, a lot of districts, we use our ESD because they'll run a program that allows all of us to benefit. So when you need part of a psych, or you need part of a nurse, or you need different pieces like that, they'll hire one or have one that they'll give us for small amounts instead of districts having to hire minimally a half-time person or a full-time person when you may not need that much. So for the SED, our suggestions are to delay the implementation for at least a year on the first day of the session and allow us to research the model. And hopefully that would be, of course, no cost to make, not do that transition yet. And especially with the more recent legislation and giving us this year to figure out the full impact rather than continuing that level of change. Fully fund the cost of implementation. Increase the number of hours needed to access SED. No cost to the state again. And I know our goal is to try to provide support for all of our employees as much as we can. But again, the huge impact without having a funding source to support it is going to be detrimental to a lot of districts. Special education, and we know special education comes up all the time, correct? The special education student percentages and funding do not cover the expenses that Mason County districts incur with SPED services. And our suggestions are to fully fund the actual cost or needs of students. And this can vary each and every year. I remember my first year here, I think I luckily was able to put in for safety net, but it was $180,000 for one student that I was looking at. And that's not uncommon. That could be any given year, no matter what size district you are. But if there's not a lot of recourse, you still have to, even with a safety net, it's still 25,000 off the top, and then you can apply for it. So there's kind of some fun things with it. Reduce the complexity of safety net application and increase available funds for districts to access. Okay, so that's the 4 areas that we're looking at, some suggestions there to think about. And then at this time, we were going to turn it over, give you guys a couple minutes to kind of think about this and be able to give us some kind of response, and then maybe open it up for questions and answers afterwards. Are you guys good with that?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
Oh, thank you. This is a list that I would expect to have happen, to get from this group. As I told most of you when we met last year, I was going to vote no on the McCleary fix, and I was going to vote no because a lot of the problems that are addressed here actually were created under the McCleary fix. So trust me, your entire 35th delegation argued their lungs out to get that, to not do the McCleary fix. With that being said, I think there is a lot of good ideas in what you talked about. The SEB, we thought the SEB was going to be a lot better than it was, and it turned into a bureaucracy that is out of control right now. So absolutely, I don't even think the state has an idea about how to control the SEB. So delaying implementation is a no-brainer. Whether we can get the rest of our colleagues or enough of our colleagues to agree with us so we can delay it is yet to be known. But this paperwork and your ability to come down and help us tell the story is going to make a difference. There's a lot of concern about the levy rates. And the reason that we have concern about levy rates is I, as a legislator, do not want to be back in court again to have McCleary 2 and McCleary 3. We're going to have to figure out and clearly define. So if levy rates are allowed to go up, we're going to have to make sure that's not basic education. It's going to have to be other issues that the school is going to face. The other neat things. I mean, lots of great things that go on, and I've been asking, I asked Dana and I asked a lot of superintendents around here, we need more vocational training, more vocational training. I'd like to see every school kid that graduates high school to come out with a vocational certificate of some sort. That gives them their safety net. That gives them the safety net that says, well, maybe I don't want to go to college right away, but now I can go into the workforce and I can actually start making money. And I think there's ways we can do that, partnering with our great corporations that we have in Washington State that actually issue those certifications. So we should demand a lot from them because they're asking a lot from us because they want the future workforce to be ready to go. So I think, again, we're not asking too much here. I don't think you're asking too much at all. I think maybe sometimes you're not asking enough. We'll ask a lot for all of you. I think when it comes down to, I forgot, I just lost my train of thought for a second, but give me 1 second here, I'll look at it. Our prototypical school model has bugged me a lot. I think you school board directors that are in here, you define what the school is in your district. You define how many janitors it takes to clean your school. You define because of the school need. I think actual funding, actual costs. So when you get an enrollee that has special needs, it should be that you submit, here's our actual cost. And the superintendent of public instruction should get you a check right away to get it done. That is absolutely the best way to do it. We shouldn't just say we have to have a safety net, all this stuff. What's the actual cost? We pay the actual cost. And we know that setting up buildings for, some of our buildings, they don't even have, sometimes you have to have suspension gear, you have to have stuff bolted to walls, and I mean, it's just mind-numbing. You have to have lift transfer devices, and you have to train on lift transfer devices. It just goes on and on. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I want you to know I get it. So I think that would be the best way to do it, is to say, we say we're mainstreaming kids, and I think mainstreaming is a good idea. But we actually have to make sure that we backfill the actual cost for mainstreaming. And that $130,000, that happens. Almost every school district I represent is talking about that. One will happen. And then will they do all that investment, and maybe they're maybe they transfer then, and then they've done $130,000 investment, and then that kid will have to transfer because of one reason or another. And so, yeah, you have all that there, but then you have another kiddo that comes in with another special need that needs another $130,000 worth of. So again, the only reason I'm repeating it is because I want you to know I hear you. I think that it's the only fair way to do it. It's the only right way to do it. With that, I can talk all night, probably, so I'll leave it, give the rest of my colleague through.
Dan and I are on the same page. One, I just want to thank you for having us here again. I think this is valuable to do. To dovetail a little bit off of what Dan was saying, on the special education part, I agree. We make things complicated because that's what bureaucracies do, and it's similar to the building reimbursement form. I mean, it's insane. Why don't we just cut to the chase? And in my opinion, let's just stroke the school districts back and check for 10% of the building costs, which basically cover your sales tax, and call it a day. Instead, we put you through these hoops that you've been through, that Pioneer's been through. We don't need to do that. So I'm all for simplifying, and so that goes with the special education side of it. If the cost is X, let's subtract what you pay for your quote-unquote average student and give you a check for that difference. And I think we need to really look at simplifying that. So I'll work with Dan and see what we can do to push that forward. On the levy side and the prototypical model, the reason we get tied into this is I'm not defending it, but I'm defending it. Because because of McCleary, how do you ascertain then what the cost is per student across this entire state? That is very diverse, from Merriam Knight to downtown Seattle and Mercer Island and downtown Spokane. I mean, they're vastly different. Take Republic, that's probably very similar to Merriam Knight. Very many differences in the. So when we have the mandate, as per our Constitution, to fully fund basic education, there's got to be some type of formula. Is the formula perfect? No, it's certainly not. So I'd ask for help. How do we? I agree, we need to revisit it, but what specifically? How do we make this equitable across the entire state? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, we'd be happy. We have school leaders who can help rewrite that model so that it actually reflects what we need to do to run the school. So anybody asks us, we'll be there and we'll help.
We're asking.
Yeah.
Good, because an example that you brought up is the custodians. We're funded for less than 5 custodians for our district. It takes 15 or more to keep the buildings clean enough that kids can go to school and be safe and not catch diseases and everything else. So that's just one of those examples that we can help you determine the right number of people for positions, or school nurses. Everywhere across the state, it's 0.303 or something.
0.03
For 400 kids.
Yeah, and I have
and nobody can serve kids and their needs at that rate. And while we can do things like the public-private partnerships that we're doing, we still need school nurses there. So we are happy to put together a group and help come up with actual numbers that would work.
I think that's what we tried to do on the backside of legislative priorities, was look at, this is what we're funded by the state, this is what we are actually using right now in our schools, and what that difference is. And for, some districts it's more dramatic than others.
Again, going back to the levy issue real quick, then I'd much rather have give and take with all of you than listen to us. But again, to reiterate what Dan said, once we open that box, that is Pandora's box, and bang, we are back in Cleary too. So that was the whole gist, as you all know. I mean, I can't preach to the choir. I mean, so I hear you, but how do we do that in a manner that we don't reopen and relitigate this entire mess? Casey?
Yeah, that's my question for you.
Yeah.
How do we not reopen this mess?
Oh, no. So now that the mess has been made,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
I think the issue really has to be that unlimited tri-days in schools that can afford unlimited tri-days puts a terrible competitive disadvantage to all my schools, all the schools that I represent, from Bremerton to Rochester. I think we need to understand that some of these targeted vetoes that were imposed by the governor actually hurt the rural districts a lot. I'd like to find, if we could, a way to say that your teachers and your staff negotiate one place or the other place. At this point in time, we negotiate both places. So, we raised the salary from, minimum entry level salary to $45,000, and then now the average is about $55,000. I think that question has to be answered. Who do we negotiate with? We're going to always have two bites at the apple, and is it going to continue to go that way? We're going to have a stop place. But we're also going to have the ability to pay teachers and a salary that is commensurate with their duties. And so, yeah, we have to get there. But we also have to give you ability to be able to collectively bargain and have some expectations that they might be able to get there.
And I also don't think you should be put in the box by other districts that, frankly, I don't think bargain in a good way. Maybe they got put themselves in a box, but we know it's coming, and they're going to scream and holler that, they're now underfunded. Well, we didn't tell you to go and negotiate. You guys didn't tell you to go and negotiate 18% increase.
Yeah, even in collective bargaining, in a way it was worded both in legislation and in the documents that specifically came out with the apportionment that said salary increases. It didn't mention that it's an increase from the state for an allocation that is then, like you say, and some of those funds are coming out yet. We're taking away the levy that also funds some of the programs or even some of the grants. They assumed that all of that increase was just right for their pocket instead of understanding that it's still offsetting some of the limitations or other changes that were made. And even in the legislative wording, it said is to address salaries. And so, yeah, it was really used against every district in the state.
Well, I'll tell you, we talk about this being the McCleary fix. It wasn't only McCleary fix, it was also the teacher salary lawsuit fix as well, because there was another teacher salary issue out there too. So I think that was put in there to help maybe say we're killing two birds with one stone, but I hear you.
One thing that might help look at adjusting though some of the dollars that we're done, and it's particularly when we're looking at the regionalization thing, is we've been doing a lot of research, and we think that rather than using the cost of a home as the entire measure of cost of living for determining regionalization, we need to look at actual cost of living in districts. And there's already the data out there for the state of Washington that says, for example, being in Mason County is within less than a percentage point, depending on where you are, with Kitsap County, whereas we all know there's still that big difference for most of our districts. And so I think looking at real numbers of cost of living and not just housing costs in the major urban areas is a more realistic thing for Washington State school districts, and that would be something that perhaps you could get your colleagues to consider looking at as an adjustment.
Well, Dan, as you well know, I've talked to you about this since I've been in Olympia. The King County legislators did not take into account the drive time that it takes to get to Costco, the drive time that it takes to get actually to a store. So if you're living out in Matlock and McCleary, and we drive all over this great district, and we see the drive times. It didn't factor in. It wasn't the complete picture. It was really just the cost of a house. And that, again, another reason why I didn't support the fix. It just didn't do enough to address what's going on on the ground. It did unfortunately, it made the rich schools richer. And I hate saying we have rich and poor schools, but it did. It made rich schools richer and poorer schools maybe just tread water. Anyway, go ahead, Casey.
So going into this next legislative session here, congratulations on your victories. So do you have a plan, or where at on your list here legislatively is
well, I represent the Tumwater School District, and I went and sat with the superintendent, and we suffered together, and it's high on my list, Casey. It's very high. So
I think it's fair to say too, that the legislature as a whole recognizes that, this is not perfect and that there's going to be some tweaks. My fear though is to reopen the entire deal.
Yeah.
And that's my fear.
Yeah.
So it's maintaining discipline. There is a tremendous changeover that's in the legislature, not just because of elections, but because of retirements. And so it's going to be more of a herding cats than it normally is, and that has nothing to do with partisan politics. That has to do just with the institutional changeover. And so you're going to have some very energetic new people that might not have the full context or everything. So there's going to be some struggles, but I think the legislature as a whole recognizes that there's issues we've got to address. And so it's high on the list, and we're going to see how this shakes out. I'm disappointed though at the first day of session, the majority party chooses to debate paper and plastic when we have these issues.
Well said, both. Thank you for that answer. Appreciate it.
Who else? We're definitely in the Q&A portion of this.
Yes, sir. It's down to Q&A.
I just wanted to thank you for your emphasis, Dan, on making present discrepancies worse in the attempt to fix things. And I would say for me, that the sense of discrepancy between us and when we first started out with the regionalization of $10,000, which we've addressed substantially since, it really made us a farm team for other schools, and that is really hard for me to represent in my district when we're talking about a school board that represents the community well. And this is something that I think is just very important to us, and I appreciate that you're aware of it.
Oh, absolutely, but I think a lot of people in the room will say, I've been consistent on this since I've been in Olympia. I saw this freight train coming for a long ways, and what we thought, what we were sold was almost a bill of goods, that no one was going to be left out, and it was going to be equal education for all. And what we find is, again, we now have the haves and have-nots again, and I think, the rudder on the ship that is Olympia is a big one, and sometimes keep moving that thing takes a lot of people to do. So, a lot of times, we got, 25 freshmen? 25 freshmen. We're gonna start education is our first issue. We're gonna have to be sitting down to coffee and going out to dinner, and we're gonna have to really talk about the issues. That's really how it has to start.
So you guys are able to talk to one another?
We do, all the time. Every bill I've ever passed, John, has been bipartisan. I have not passed a bill that didn't have a Democrat co-sponsor.
I'm delighted to hear it.
And John, the partisanship in Olympia is not what you hear and see on the national level.
Well, that's good to hear.
So.
Go ahead, sir.
Does the legislature realize what's going to start happening to our school districts if a fix doesn't come through?
Absolutely. I do at least. And that's, again, what we have to, we that know it, that see the derailing of the train, we have to be educated now. We have to tell them, we have to tell the story. You have a wonderful guy back here, is a really good guy, Troy Nichols, that is also going to help tell the story for at least ESD 113. 113 is going to tell the same story 114 is going to be telling, right? I mean, it's not, they're not going to say two different things. So there's a lot of people that know what's coming down. We know that with some of these contracts that were signed, that there are schools in significant trouble. And we're going to have to get on top of it.
And the struggle is, and a challenge for us is educating our colleagues. I mean, there truly is an urban and rural divide in the legislature. And again, it's not a partisan item. It's just, it is what it is. There's a vast majority of people in the legislature that, represent a 6-block radius. And every kid walks to school unless there's a railroad track that runs through there, and then they get bused. I mean, that's their viewpoint of the state of Washington. And obviously ours is vastly different. So the challenge for us is in, conveying what the rest of the state is, which is majority of it is rural. And again, there's a challenge with the changeover that we've had in the legislature, but those are challenges that we'll rise to and that we'll address. But that is a real issue, is that disconnect between urban and rural areas.
I'm on the small schools task force, so I appreciate you saying that. That's really true. 200 out of the 295 school districts are small schools in the state, both sides of the mountains. And we are very concerned about that. And one of the suggestions that has come up is on the formulas that you have to deal with. You have apples and oranges. Have different formula for a small school versus a large school. We, for a small school versus a large school.
I think there is a lot of political will, so the senior leadership that's still there in the majority party right now does, I think, finally understand after 4 years of us browbeating them that we have to have, that it is an apple and orange sort of issue. You know, we talk about simple thing, and I don't want to go back to North Mason all the time, but it's my school district that, well, it's my school district that I live in, so my wife is a school board director there as well. You know, just the simple busing issue of how the crow flies. Well, you know what? A bus can't swim across a canal. And so that funding formula was just ignorant. You just can't, I just don't get how that could be that way. And so they'd have to have a special allocation every year. Well, why don't we just have a real allocation? You have to drive around the canal. We didn't build a bridge so that you can drive across the canal. Just simple things like that I just, like Drew said, that's the big difference between rural and urban. And when you're stuck in your box with your blinders on about what you know, you have less sympathy for what you don't know. And so I've had a lot of luck by just saying, hey, come out and take a, you know, we're in Olympia, you're here for the weekend, let's go meet with our superintendents. And I hope you'd be open to that, because we'd like to say, hey, King County legislators, come over and talk to these folks. And I'd be happy to try to put something like that on. If we can get them over here, let's do it. Let's take the advantages at the time to say, this is different here. I mean, I love it here. I've spent my entire life here, 48 years. And just, you know,
We do have the
so-
same kind of concerns that you hear about with Eastern Washington versus Western Washington.
There is. It's significant.
When you go to anything for WPA or anything, all the decisions are made from Snohomish, Pierce County. And there's, no matter how much dollars, I've been there as a teacher, but they don't hear the little small school districts. And I did work with teachers in King County, and they have no concept whatsoever. They walk to work, and they really don't. So, yeah, what my question was, what is it that we can do to help you get this message?
Well, that's my idea. I would like to bring some King County legislators down and just have them talk. And just have them see what's going on. I have a lot of luck with that. I've worked on GMA reform, and I have a lot of luck on that by bringing some King County legislators down that are good friend colleagues of mine now. And they said, yeah, this is way different. This isn't what I'm used to. I live in SeaTac, and this is nothing like that. I said, well, yeah, and I'm proud of it.
Well, we'd be happy to host him. We'll take him on a couple bus routes.
Yeah. I'm sure Sheldon would like to take on some bus routes as well.
Yeah, make sure
And all
you
of
take
you.
them down the road and say, well, we're not paid to go come back down the road, so you're not.
Well, you know what? I'm going to offer, as soon as I get to Olympia, I'm going to offer it up, and I'm going to see if I can get someone out here. I really do. I mean, especially those that don't go home on weekends. It's hard during session when you go home on weekends, so what we might have to do is get through this session and make sure we bring them out. But we got to tell our story, and I'll help you do it.
Fridays might be a viable option too.
Fridays
That's the
are-
way the legislature
yeah.
schedules things right now. And we'll also have a better understanding of the makeup of committees in about a week and a half. So I don't expect the education chair to change, but I think once we have that in place, I think we can start working on that. And I think that would be very useful to get frankly the entire committee on here.
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea. We could, you know, I worked with Sharon Tamico Santos on K-12 Education Committee for 2 years. She is really amicable to really understanding. We did my first year, my freshman year in legislature, we took a tour of Shelton School District was a major stop-off point for us. And we, you know, they were very proud of Choice High School, and as I am. What's going on there, and I think she'd be willing to come back, so I'll be making phone calls.
One other item I want to throw out that's not on your list, but is at the front of the legislature's mind right now, and that's the school safety issue. And there is a lot of attention and thought going into building security. And I don't know if I think some of you were at the breakfast last fall when a mom from Newton, Connecticut, she gave this presentation. That's a tough breakfast to be at, but what she talked about, I think, is very germane to how we can really improve the physical security of our schools. I want to put that out there, that that's something else that's going to be at the forefront of the legislature. And I think my hope is that we can do a lot of that through the capital budget. But that's not going to happen overnight, but I just want you to be thinking about that.
I'm hoping before the end of the biennium, we put school resource officer in every school in the state of Washington, and I hope that we develop a reporting app that is scalable, that all schools can have it. We develop it, and then it can be scalable for your folks. I know that I talked to Aaron Levine up in Bremerton, and they're developing their own app. Well, it's a good idea, because if we're talking about school safety, let's go back to the one commonality of all of the shootings. Somebody knew something ahead of time and didn't say anything. And what are the barriers to reporting those activities? Well, they quite frankly, those kids quite frankly thought that that person might kill them. And looking at it, the kids were pretty smart in thinking that. So if we remove those barriers with an app, it happens to be a way that kids communicate these days, might be a way that we can also expand and say, I'm feeling bullied in school, then you guys could have a rapid response group that would go out and help the child that's being bullied. Maybe they're saying that I feel suicidal. Well, we can have an even more rapid response group that say, oh my goodness, we got to get there. I think that it doesn't have to be just school safety, it's school safety, security, and emotional, social well-being. I think we could develop that app as a state, and that app could then be delivered out to all of you.
So you said by the end of the biennium, that's what you're shooting for?
I would love to see that. Our caucus.
But right now, we're basically, that's what.
This is the money year, so the money year is a long year, and getting things to actually happen after the money year.
Yes.
Delays are inevitable. Just getting the formularies out.
So essentially, we're taking it on the chin for the year, right?
I'm telling you, I never promise you that I will do anything. The only thing I promise you is I fight like a Tasmanian devil to get what we want.
Yes.
What I want to see happen is a school resource officer in every classroom. Classroom, excuse me. Every school.
And redesign that physical security.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, we have to do that.
What else?
So what are your estimations, if you were to guess how much of this list we would be addressing this next session, what were your estimates?
John, that is a pretty tall question. If it was up to me, 100%, I couldn't give you a number right now, John. I'm going to tell you I'm arguing for all of
Yeah,
that.
I didn't mean it in that way, Drew. I mean, Dan, I just think your sense of the body of where the...
I believe you're going to see a per pupil funding increase as a response. Again, is that going to help with the rich and poor schools as far as teacher recruiting and the issue that you had with farm team? I don't know. Probably not. I mean, what it's going to say is that we're going to proportionally raise everything. And that's what I'm a little worried about, because then again, the competitive disadvantage of being in a rural district is still there.
To be pragmatic, and you're not going to like this answer, but will we be able to accomplish some of this? Yes, I believe so. The problem that we face, boy, it needs to be recorded. This state is becoming ungovernable. And I say that because we're driven by lawsuits and initiatives. And now the lawsuits that we're dealing with, now that in theory McCleary's done, the two lawsuits we have now before us are fish culverts, which is a $30 billion issue, and mental health. And so that doesn't mean that this is totally being ignored, but we're trying to stave off these next 2 lawsuits, we as the legislature as a whole. And so that's the challenge we have in all of this. And so, you know, we will certainly go to bat. And I think, you know, one of the things is the special education that touches every district in the state. You know, and we can, I think that's something we can tackle and begin to get to the right solution on. So I mean, I look at that one as a strong possibility. I think there's a lot of interest in fixing the sub-issues that are out there. But my guess is there would not be the stomach to get involved in the levy, the salary, the collective bargaining at this point in time. There'll be talk, but I don't think there's gonna be the stomach to do it. I'm just trying to be pragmatic about, you know.
I appreciate your pragmatism and the comment you didn't make. Given the structure of things, there's a great difficulty in governing.
Yeah. Yeah. But that doesn't mean we're not gonna work on it.
No,
I think we will.
right.
We will.
Well, and again, something that is no cost is to define what it is to be a professional in the education field. And that still is something that's going to, when you're talking about fire, you're talking about all the nickel and diming and everything else that comes to districts. I mean, those of us that have been educators for almost 40 years, you know, I mean, we're not doing necessarily different jobs, but everything's getting, you know, well, now we won't money for this, now we won't money for that. And, you know, I mean, districts can't afford to do that.
No,
And-
if I can finish.
Yeah.
Sorry, got excited.
That must be all the time, Dan, don't worry
But
about
if
it.
there's some way that those of us that are involved in education, and I hear it from teachers too. I mean, the same concern, saying, gosh, I'm sorry for that, or I'm, you know, and there's just, that's something that, as Dan said, we're willing to help. We're willing to help create that type of documentation that is no added expense, but clearly needs to be done. I mean, that's going to help Seattle, that's going to help Southside, that's going to help North Mason. It's going to help every district to have that level of clarity.
Agreed.
One thing and again, I'm trying not to get into the partisan side of things, but again, just speaking a little bit pragmatically here. If there is taxes that are instituted in this session, I think there's a probability of that. I would not bank on that money, because whatever you think of whatever tax schemes that have been proposed in the last 6 years, one thing is clear, and that is the voters of this state have resoundingly voted no every time. And I guarantee you, if there is anything passed in this session, there will be an initiative on the ballot in November, and will most likely get repealed. And I'm saying that now. So if you're promised a pot full of money at the end of this session, I wouldn't bank it. So I just want to put that out there.
Well, if I can go back to what Doris was talking about, in another meeting on Monday, we were given a little teaser about the work that's coming out of the committee that OSCAG put together in response to the legislature with the directive to come up with a definition of what a professional educator's day, week, year looks like. And that is something that, you know, was so vague in the language that we had to then try to negotiate with and around, but with the idea that something would be coming. So we're hearing that you, when you get into session, are going to get some feedback from that committee. And I think that would be one place we could really get some good feedback once that gets released. Because, you know, I heard in my meeting on Monday about one line of what's going to be in that definition and thought, oh, we could live with that. So once we hear more, we really probably, many of us would love to be able to give you what we think.
We'll give you as much advance notice as we can. A lot of times, the committee chairs don't give as much notice as we'd like to see. More sunshine's better than less, I guarantee you.
I think we're all here this evening because we believe education is extremely important. That's why we're here. But I can tell you, based on conversations that I've had with my colleagues, with teachers, with paras, with the classified staff, they're worried how we can continue financially in the years to come. And I can tell you, if we all want the very best educational program for our students, here's what could happen. In order to afford the raises that we've given, You know, you can give a raise, but you can't give it to everybody. And then you start cutting staff, which will directly impact program. And so if you continue on that path, everything that we're talking about in terms of providing the very best 21st century education for our students is going to be a dream. So if you can carry back that message, that if we don't fix some of the things that are taking place right now, we're going to destroy everything we've worked for, and what you're going to create is apathy, because we've pushed our staff to a certain level to perform, to offer the very best education, and then when we start cutting what we've established, good luck. It's going to be very difficult to come back.
Well, like I said, Alex, I heard you loud and clear. I saw this in the McCleary Fix. I knew what was going to happen. It wasn't like you even needed a crystal ball. And even though the freight train was ready to derail, they went that way anyway. And I say they, and I guess I'm part of they, but I voted no because I want to make sure that people knew why. It's like, I can't vote yes on something that's going to make all of the schools I represent less whole. Because we all were promised when we went into this negotiation, the handshake negotiation, the fix was going to be nobody was going to lose. And that's not the case.
We both voted no, by the way.
I get that.
So I think just to piggyback on that, larger districts have more layers, and there's a reasonable place sometimes to cut, and I've been through that where central office condenses. It's not pleasant, but it can happen. Smaller districts don't have that layer. We don't have instructional coaches. We don't have all those other things that might be able to go away. If we reduce bus routes, which isn't a huge money saver, it means our kids are on buses for an hour and a half instead of just an hour. So, you know, I understand, and we're all kind of in this together. I see the McCleary Fix hurting smaller districts a lot faster.
Yeah, you're absolutely. We saw it when we read it. All you have to do is read the bill to understand it. And then
there are kids though that are being impacted.
I hear you. I know. That's.
And you mentioned possibility of a per pupil increases, and just wanted to reiterate that for the smaller districts, there's also per district costs that are associated with maintaining the programs, and I think that's per pupil increases in funding is great, but we need to make sure that there's recognition of the cost of the smaller districts to do business, maintain programs and paperwork that all schools have to do, and they're disproportionately high cost of doing business for small districts.
You make a great point. I think when you look at it, that under the McCleary decision, I mean, this is in our favor, right? Everyone has, it's a paramount duty of the education of Washington State to make sure all children, not just King County core children, are adequately educated, all. And you know, we can take that out further and say, well, actually having a certified teacher in the classroom, which, you know, going to your point, that's what you're down to cutting sometimes. I mean, that's what it's going to take to get to our paramount duties. So the good news is we can use the verbiage in the McCleary decision to make sure that we get our fair share again.
So, on the last bit there, so the one level you saw was a certified, do you have a certified teacher in that classroom, right? And I get it, and I appreciate the pragmatism and the directness, and so essentially, just to be, 30 grade poo filter on this, right? There's not going to be a fix coming out of this session. We're looking at a biennium.
I didn't say there wasn't going to be a fix. What I said is I think what you're seeing is a per pupil response is kind of the knee-jerk response in Olympia.
Right.
And then there is some that say they want to raise the local levies. Again, the concern from some of us is we just don't want to go through this McCleary thing again. So can we do it right to where we don't get there?
Yes.
So I'm just saying there is probably 15 different ways to look at it. We got to find the one that fits, you know, so we're not putting round pegs in square holes again. So that's what, I'm not saying there's not going to be a fix. I think there's going to be more funding for the lower, the smaller school districts. I really believe that. I really believe that we're going to have a special education touch. And like Drew just alluded to is when one of your lines on here actually matches up with every school district in the state of Washington, that'll probably be dealt with first. So I think if you look at this, you can easily prioritize, see where it's going to start happening quicker.
We'll get, I think one of the things too that's going to have a big impact on what direction the session goes is in another week and a half, the governor releases his budget, and that is a driving factor. I mean, the legislature's not bound to his budget proposal, but it's a starting point. I think we'll, you know, certainly he's, you know, in a position that is going to, you know, drive the talking points. So we'll see what that brings and go from there. And I think there'll be some things in there that we'll probably agree with, and there'll be others that we don't. But that's the challenge, is getting into the common ground there. So
what
stand by another week or so.
So what do you perceive could be in there that you would not agree with? Since
You're putting me on the
I am.
spot, which I'm trying to avoid, but I'll just in the 6 years I've been there, his track record is to promise the sky and everything possible with it, and not have the means to fund it. That's been his track record. So I expect that that's going to happen, and then we got to carve all that out and bring it back to reality and what can pass the legislature. So, you know, but I think again, going back to what I said earlier, there's going to be a lot more focus on the mental health issues, which does involve obviously our school districts as well. And I think that might be an area where we can find some commonality, you know, with some things. But he says a lot of things and does other things, so it's hard for me to predict what he's going to do here.
So I guess my concern is that I know you guys didn't vote for this. Appreciate that. But now there's an even greater control of the people who did vote for it and there. And we're going to have schools this year that will fail financially. And what are those people going to do? I would guess that there's a large majority that over the next 2 or 3 years, most of the schools are slated to fail.
Yeah, yep. That's the concern.
I'll reiterate, I think you're going to see more funding for schools. You're probably going to see a percentage larger funding increase for rural schools and smaller schools, and I think you're going to see that because the message is starting to get out. What it looks like, we have 105 days to figure that out. We have our ideas, but the biggest thing that we can do is if we can get an educational opportunity to really tell the story, that really, really makes a difference in Olympia. It really does. And I've committed right now on tape. I'm going to try to make that happen. And as many of you can show up and tell a story, I'd appreciate it.
So a lot of us have been seeing this whole cycle of things that happen in education for many, many years. And it hasn't been talked about so much for several years now. Are we looking, because of this, the funding and larger schools and smaller schools, are we going to see this be brought back up again about consolidation?
I don't think so. I really don't think so.
I'm sorry to say, but that's what it looks like. And
I don't
whether
think.
it's delivered or not, that's what it looks like.
But I don't think so. But anyway, that's my opinion. I don't think so.
Well, I'm sorry, that's kind of what it looks like. So.
Okay, well,
We need to be prepared.
Yes, we do.
we'll be prepared for it, but I just don't think that they're going to have a stomach for that either. There's too much political outcry against it.
It's pretty tough for the state to force that. I mean, that has to come from the
Well,
ground up.
financially, they probably are right now, so.
Right.
It's not necessarily forcing it, it's just creating conditions.
Creating
Sure.
conditions.
Taking it on.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a lot of people in Olympia that want that. I know, when I
There's
first,
also a lot of constituents, I mean, that's something, I mean, I hear that routinely from constituents throughout Mason County. I mean, it's not just Olympian people that say it's, because in their mind, you know, why do we have so many superintendents and, you know, that, so, it's not just the bureaucracy down there that says, I hear it from constituents on a routine basis as well, so. But having said that, I think if you put anything to a vote right now in the community, if they're, I mean, look at the Canal situation, I mean, you know, with Pioneer, I mean, that's all woefully short, you know. And I think that would probably be the case as the world sits today in most districts if there were to be an effort to consolidate. I don't think it would pass there. Fire districts struggle to do it. I mean,
yes, they did.
everybody wants their own
Pressure.
pressure. I mean, that's.
Sorry.
Again, I'm already watching it happen in my district. I'm already watching it happen in my district.
What are you watching happen in your district?
The setup for consolidation. It is economically and fiscally, there's absolutely no way currently for that not to occur. Specifically in our district because it's we have two different ports and they're gonna, one side's gonna throw on an added tax and probably try to absorb the other port. And at that point, then you have a complete loss of the other side.
I know port directors.
And that's an outside decision. But I do want to, what I want to say is I applaud your decision to vote against it, and stand strong and being pragmatic and telling us the truth in this, and being straight, because that's the only way that we can possibly handle this. The only way we can possibly handle this and hold our own. Put our fists up, go a few rounds and hold our own. It's the only way. You know.
Well, I probably won't get physical, but.
Well,
we should look though for efficiencies. I mean, and I don't know the answer to this. I mean, is there, and this may or may not be a cost thing, I'm just throwing this off the cuff here, but is there anything that prevents you from doing more efficiencies like with transportation? Does the RCW require each district to own its own buses, et cetera? I mean, things like that. Again, I'm just throwing that out without, you know, I don't know the entire background of that particular issue, but if there are things like that that are preventing you from, you know, crossing the lines and, you know, sharing some resources, if there's something that prevents that from happening, let us know. That's happy to run stuff like that. I know that's not going to solve the whole picture, but, you know, if we can pick up some of those, let's do it.
Drew, I would guess that busing is, although it's expensive, is probably a little bit farther down on the list than things like sped costs, employee costs, maintenance costs. That's where the schools need the money.
But to answer your question, no, for a lot of things, whether it's special ed or busing or different things, I know some of the districts in Mason County right now are talking about putting together a co-op for special education. We're able to do that right now. It's just when does it make sense and in a way that districts can maintain their identity but provide services for kids. And I think that's important to all the districts. And I know some of you guys are working on something like that right now.
Yeah. And we're co-op with transportation, food services, and special education.
And you couldn't exist without our ESD either. They're vitally important for small schools.
Yes. And that the ESDs create quite a lot of cost savings for districts
Yes.
by providing all sorts of different services. One of the things that you touched on was the school safety thing. And I know there is some legislation on putting together the school safety centers around the state, and that would be one thing that would be really helpful to help all of us have some more of those services in our schools are available to us right now to have those centers supported.
So yes, our ESDs provide a lot, but they also charge for those services.
Yes.
So our ESDs are not fully funded, which means that even though we got, 1.9% MSOC, and their increases by 5%, so we're still in the hole. So
ESD rates went up 5%?
a lot of their different categories, I'm not saying across the board, but a lot of the different ones went up about 5%. So yes, they do a lot of great things for us, and they charge us for most of the things they do.
And one of the things that's driving that going into next year is the SEB costs. And for the ESDs, because of the way they're funded, the SEB costs are hitting them even more dramatically than they're hitting us at the district level, causing them to have to look at raising costs or cutting supports to districts.
I'm working with Troy and 113, and we're looking at some
Good.
legislative solutions there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to speak a little bit about your efficiency comment. So I think a small school is a little more efficient already because we have no choice.
Yeah.
Our district office, there's 1, 2, 3 of us are period. That's the secretary, that's the student side, that's the payroll side, that's the HR side, that's the discipline side. A larger school might have 10 of them or even more. So I think we're already running at extremely efficient to struggling.
Well, I think what he was talking about is if there's barriers for you doing the good things on the ground that you think would help, we need to know about that. And I think that's what he meant. And I agree. We can't know all of those barriers. I mean, I've asked for comprehensive lists of unfunded mandates, and if I talk to every school district in the state of Washington, I'll get a different list. So what is, I mean, I'd be like, okay, stroke the pen, I'll get rid of that unfunded mandate, but, you know, again, we can't get at least one school district to agree with another one, what that unfunded mandate is, and so, you know, if we can get, go ahead.
There's a big one just came out of this last legislature where we have to now itemize every revenue source and expenditure. So nobody gave us more money for our business managers to do that. Nobody funded the software to do that. We have to pay for all of those things, and yet it's still a requirement.
But, you know, my idea on that would be to be on a 10-year cycle, and, you know, you have a soft touch audit at 5 years and then a hard touch audit at 10 years. I mean, there's no way the public's going to see their right to, you know, we want to know where the money's going. We want to make sure that there's no embezzlement and that kind of thing, which I know none of my schools are going to have that issue, but they happen all over the state, that kind of thing. So if we made those audits and those reporting periods longer and trusted more, then I think that it could reduce your costs quite a bit. And again, that was one of the unfunded mandates that I think every school district in the state of Washington agrees on.
Correct.
Of course.
I think you and I talked about it.
Yep. The smallest ones still have to pay that fee and.
Yeah.
Anyone else? We'll stay in touch as we go into session. We will try to set up something. It might unfortunately be towards the end of session that we're able to bring more of the education committee out here, but I think that would be a very vital, important thing to do. We'll work on that. We'll start working on some things with these that we can do. And
can we get a key contact? I mean, a couple of key contacts. Is there going to, you know, a lot of time, who's going to be the one that?
Marissa and I share the superintendent for
So
Mason County.
it's easier than having to make the phone call to all of you, but, you know, as long as you have a communication network to where, you know, we can pick up the phone, a couple of you call us. I think that's the better way to do business in Olympia. Easier, because if you come visit us in our offices, you see we live our life in 10-minute increments, and we're moving like crazy. So I'd like to make sure we get those key contacts, make sure you get a hold of our offices and identify yourselves as key contacts.
Well, and I think we can speak for these superintendents, that any of us, I mean, in our conversations are more than willing to step up. I don't care if it's short notice or not. If I'm in the building, you know, more than happy to help, and I think that kind of goes for any of us. We'd like to open up our districts to folks, you know, if you get some of those.
Yeah.
And I used to work in North Shore School District, so
There you
I've
go.
been up in the big districts too. We'd love to have him come down and really get to see some of the differences.
Well, that's my idea, that I think we could really tell our story, and that we have to be, again, we have to be educators right now ourselves on what's going on, so.
We really appreciate your time. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming tonight.
Thank you.
There's tons of food back there, so stay and mingle a little bit. We really appreciate all of our board members as well for
Yes.
being here. So
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.